What's your emergency?
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the PIO Podcast, a place for all things public information related for police, fire, EMS, local, state, and federal government. An open forum to learn, grow, and develop your public information skills. My name is Robert Tortabeni, and I am your host. I am a public information officer with over 17 years in the field and 27 years of law enforcement background. In each episode, we will explore different aspects of the public information officer profession. Weekly, we'll delve into the field of public information by talking to other PIOs. Welcome to Season 5. Thank you for your support of the podcast. I can't believe we're in our 5th season. So sit back and enjoy this episode.
Good morning. Today on the PIO podcast, we'd like to welcome Public Information Officer Victorian Simmons. She's from the city of Apex in North Carolina. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Victoria, really quickly, you're in North Carolina, and with all the news lately with the hurricane that has hit, how are you guys affected there in North Carolina?
Yeah, to answer that question, I'm in central North Carolina. So with Apex, we received high winds and potential down tree warnings. So locally, luckily, we were not affected the way that our Western North Carolina was. But outside of my position as a PIO with Apex, I actually serve as a volunteer on the CERT team for North Carolina State. So State Emergency Response Team. And so I've been able to help with them in some of their communications with social media from North Carolina State Emergency Management. But actually, they reached out and asked PIOs all over the state if anyone was willing and able to help, because there's such a shortage of communication professionals out in the Western North Carolina. With everything going on, it's just so much to balance. So Sunday, there's actually a chance that I'll be deploying out to Western North Carolina to help for 7 days.
Oh,
so.
Wow. Well, you know what? That's awesome that you're able to do that and that your community is going to allow you to do that. That's great.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing that connecting with or being able to back up other communities is an awesome thing to do.
Yeah, the devastation is pretty bad right now. I don't remember a time when it has been this bad. In one county alone, we have 57 fatalities as of this morning.
You know, and I don't know if the media is giving it quite the justice that it needs and the attention that it needs. I think the media is kind of like they're too busy and focused on the election, and they're not really looking at this as anything to be concerned about. And it's tragic. I've been to North Carolina in several of the communities out there, and I'm very familiar with some of those areas, and I'm in shock at what I've seen so far.
It's even, I used to work for Greensboro Fire Department, and I was exposed to some of what the Task Force 6 has dealt with prior to this emergency coming through, this hurricane. And I am also completely shocked at the widespread amount of the devastation. You know, sometimes they can focus in on one area and show that one shot over and over again to create a story. And everywhere you look, in the small towns, in Asheville alone, the devastation is just incredibly wide. There's still 600 missing people in Asheville, North Carolina right now. So.
Unbelievable. It's crazy. All right, let's jump into this interview. Victorian, how about your background? Can you tell us a little bit of your background on how you became the PIO at the city of Apex?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different background in history, but I have, watching the PIO podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts, I've noticed that PIOs always wind up in their role because it's something they're passionate about, and then you just can't get them out of it, right? So I started, I have a bachelor's degree in marketing, a master's in business management, and I'm actually 4 classes away from a PhD in communications from Liberty University right now. And yeah, I'm really excited about my dissertation, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Maybe we'll talk about it on another one. But I started my career in nonprofit fundraising for higher ed institutions. So you talk about trying to reach a very difficult crowd with a difficult task, right? And that's the strategic communications fault. Hey, you spent 4 years and over, in some cases, $100,000. Can you give us some more? It's a very, very hard thing to do. But I switched out of that and I was a director of communications in a fitness industry company here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And COVID hit, and the fitness industry was one of the hardest hit industries, right? And so I lost my position. I went home. I've never not done something. So I was praying like no one's business, and I wound up working for the Greensboro Fire Department as their community engagement specialist. And then I really, really felt like this is where I was called to be. And working with first responders is something I will never stop doing moving forward. And so looking at my position where I was like, what's the next step? And where can I go to still be working with first responders? And this position with Apex popped up, and I was like, this is it. This is where I need to go right now. And so I took the position, and now I'm the public information officer for Apex. So
Awesome. Wait a minute. So you got a job during the pandemic working for a fire department?
Yes. So towards the end of the pandemic, they created a position. It was called community engagement specialist, and I'm not necessarily sure that they knew what they wanted in the role, but I came in and somewhat developed it for them. And now that one role has actually turned into 4 different roles. And it just speaks to the incredible need for communicators in the fire industry. I know PIOs work for police and fire, but specifically with fire, there's just such a critical need for well-trained, well-educated communicators to help tell their story.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. All right. So let's talk about the city of Apex. Where's it located in North Carolina?
Yeah. So the city of Apex is the suburbs of Raleigh is the best way I can put it, where, a national perspective would understand where it's at. But it is known as the peak of good living. So if you check it out, something that I always tell everyone to do is check out census data. Something that is great to know about Apex is it has a population of about 60,000 people, and their median income is about 120 to 140,000. So,
is that in Wake County?
Yes, it's in Wake County.
Okay, I'm pretty familiar with the area. I did some training down there in Raleigh with some community groups and years ago in a different capacity. Yeah. So completely understand it and have been down that area. So absolutely beautiful area, by the way, in North Carolina.
Thanks.
So let's talk about your primary responsibilities with the city. What do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah. So what's really unique about the PIO position with Apex, and one thing that I was really drawn to, is that the position focuses on fire and police. Originally, they wanted to call the position Public Safety Public Information Officer, and thank God for my director saying that's way too much. And she said this should just be a Public Information Officer role, but I report to the Director of Communications. So I technically am the Public Information Officer for the town, but on my day-to-day basis, I'm spending almost every single day with fire and or police. Something that I do that may be more unique as a PIO is I focus on telling the stories of what officers or firefighters are doing just in their day-to-day tasks. I know a lot of some of these podcasts really focus on the crisis communication aspect, right? That 5%. Is that better? Are you getting my feedback? Okay. Sorry. I was like, what's going on? But I focus a lot on that 95. So the 95.5, that 95, I really, really draw into. So
let's talk about first getting into the job. What did you find kind of the most challenging when you first took the position at Apex?
Oh, great question. coming from working for the fire department, Greensboro Fire Department, they have over 600 firefighters. Moving into a smaller town, going from a predominantly sworn organization to working for a department that is not sworn. And so I've been speaking about the importance of working with other professionals that can have your back, right? So there's the strengths and the weaknesses of working for a non-sworn department, and that my team right now understands everything marketing and communications, but they may not have that total perspective of working with sworn officers and firefighters every day. And so when I have a strong focus on making sure messages are sent out in a very timely order, right? Because that's more of that like response that's been instilled in me from Greensboro. Sometimes I get we need to stop and think about it first. And so there's this constant pull back and forth. And I'd say the biggest challenge with my role right now is working between the chief and my director, and not in any sort of bad, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's challenges that we have to work through, and it can overall be something incredible for the organization, like the industry as a whole, if we can figure it out. So
understandable. I should have asked this earlier on. So how many sworn firefighters, police officers do you deal with? I mean, what are the two agencies? What's the manpower for those agencies?
Yeah, so both are over 100. So fire's 100, police is 100.
Okay, so very decent sized departments, and for you being the public information officer for police fire for the city, are you the sole person that deals with those two, or do you have other people that work with you to help you do your work?
I think that plays into the last question that you asked. And before I was in my position, my director of communications was trying to balance all of that in an extremely fast growing area. And now in my role, I focus with media, but I use the chiefs as backboards to bounce information off of. Stacy, who's my director of communications, is kind of my backup now, and she's letting me take the reins on a lot of things that they hired me to do. But then in the same sense, when we dump down into that non-crisis response, I'm working with the CPOs for a lot of community events and information going out, and then with fire, the community risk reduction specialist for all things fire. It's this very interesting organizational pool that I'm having to come up with just by the position where it's located in the organization. So
okay, I get it. And you know what? That's great that you have at least the CPOs, and then your community. I forget what the name was for the fire side of it.
Yeah.
Those groups, those two people on each side to help you connect, and then to generate that content. That's awesome. All right. So can you talk about like a successful community engagement initiative that you've implemented in Apex?
Yeah. So ironically, the chief came to me about 3 weeks ago and said, hey, we need to get information about crosswalk safety. And so I was like, all right, chief, I'm on it. This is a hard topic, especially there's movements going on about where people can and cannot walk. I know out on the West Coast, it's a little bit larger of a topic than it is on the East Coast right now. And so I warned, hey, maybe let's not go this direction with it, but let's try just more of an educational route. And so I was working with one of our traffic safety unit officers, and we created a video that is a bit more silly. And we went along the lines of go for a sticker, not a ticket, because we have those junior ranger, like the junior officer badges. So if they do something good, like they follow crosswalk safety, they get a sticker. If they don't, then like there's the ticket, even though we weren't enforcing. Like we didn't have an increase in enforcement over this campaign. So that was very successful. And the showing our officers as a bit more silly, the community reacted with so well. just humanizing officers, implementing the educational piece in it, but also wrapping it into community engagement. It was incredibly successful. The video was shared, and I think it was viewed over 20,000 times between all the different analytical information we analyzed. So it was great.
That's awesome that you were able to see the connection for the community to the humor and the humanizing of those people, because I think that is one thing that some communications professionals struggle with. Do they balance that image of police, or do they make it humanizing the police, that balance? And we can do it. We can do both in different times, and that's important. But the community really wants to know. They want to connect with their police officers and their firefighters. So outstanding job. Let's talk about diversity. How do you ensure that there's diverse voices within the community, that they're heard and represented?
We've identified officers and firefighters on both fire and police that have diverse backgrounds, and they are bilingual. And so we use their talents to be able to communicate with certain populations in our area that we wouldn't have been able to without them. And so we know different sections in our community that need a little bit more focus than others when it comes to making sure we're approaching them in a way that they'll be able to receive the information. Just to your point in what we were just talking about, people from different backgrounds, we have to be able to get on their level, and we need to be able to go to them so they can receive the information. At the end of the day, I'm a PIO because I want people to know information that can save their life if it can. And so making sure I'm being strategic in how I go into those communities with the crews and the officers that we have to make sure we're successful in our campaigns is critical. And so, to your point, again, something that I view a little bit differently than most PIOs is what I wear. And so I've heard it over and over and over again, make sure you're in the most expensive clothes, and make sure you're well respected, your hair's done. And sometimes, for example, going into a disaster zone next week, that's not a priority, right? And if I come in looking different than everyone else who just lost everything around them, they're not going to receive it well. And so understanding your environment is so critical. So I would say that is probably making sure we're incredibly strategic in knowing what we want to say, knowing where we're going, and knowing how we can measure that is really our largest outcomes of that.
Outstanding. I'm glad you bring that up about understanding your community and understanding how just the appearance, your appearance alone. I mean, there was some recent political stuff that came out when Camilla visited the border. And the one thing that I saw that was posted was they were all talking about the chain that she was wearing. It was allegedly a $40,000 piece of gold. And I'm thinking, that's not the kind of thing you want to talk about when you're at the border, and that took away from the message when she was at the border. So again, think of the optics are very important, and that the term optics is the camera view of it, but the lens view. But we have to think about that going into somebody's home when like I know for here where I'm at, culturally, there's a lot of Asian community members, and when I was an officer going into a home, you weren't going to take your shoes off because it's an officer safety issue, but you might offer. Yeah. And they would at least respect that. So again, understanding that's really, really important. And I'm so happy to hear that you're considering that. Can we talk about technology? How's it changed the way you communicate with the public?
Oh, I love this question. I'm so glad you asked. This is my specialty. So when it comes to technology, being that I report to the director of communications, I have so much more access to technology and softwares and help that I may not have been when I was working in predominantly sworn organization, right? So two technologies, I'm sure you've heard one over and over again, right? So one is going to be Zen City. It's a software. I thoroughly enjoy using Zen City. One, because when I'm put under a lot of pressure and I'm on scene, whether that's with police, maybe at a raid, or maybe at a bank robbery, or if I'm with fire and there's an active structure fire going on, Zen City has a tool inside the software where it will help me write a first draft press release through its AI technology. So I put in the information that I know at the time while I'm talking to reporters. I might step away for 5 minutes, and that Zen City tool will actually pump me out a press release. And so I'm able to multitask what I'm doing. Being one PIO, balancing fire and police, I am largely depending on my tools to be able to help me, and that is technology. So I'm able to get a press release out, and I can drop it into a Word document on my OneDrive on my phone. I'm able to read through it when I have a break from speaking to media, and then I can send that over to the chiefs to say, hey, go ahead and start looking at this, add in the information that you want changed. Another thing with Zen City is if you link it up to your Nextdoor app, which is, you can also work with Nextdoor to get a police or a fire, what's the word I'm looking for? Profile, and they can actually take your districts and your jurisdiction and put it into that your own personalized Nextdoor. So,
are you talking about a KML file?
Yes, and
okay.
it's really neat. But the Zen City will take the Nextdoor boundaries that it's created, and you can push out messaging through Nextdoor into those certain areas. So, for example, if we have a missing person, instead of dropping it on Facebook and notifying the entire population plus surrounding communities, and it may not be to that point in the process yet, you can use Nextdoor to hit the 5 surrounding communities to be able to first start your messaging there, and then, hey, maybe an hour later, if the person still hasn't been identified, expand to Facebook, right? Using the correct tools for the correct job, like the correct process in it. And then the other tool, which I'm already getting into, is social media. So many times I've heard chiefs say, you know, social media is great, but it's not about the likes and it's not about the comments. And I will beg to differ with that, because it's just a different form of communication. So in the same way, as an officer, you would prioritize having a conversation with someone out in the community face to face. People are just trying to do that with you on social media. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as a communication. It is the same need for an interaction to try and understand how I want to feel about an officer or an organization or a police department. I'm going to take certain steps to try and get there. And so social media is a tool that I use every single day to try and strengthen community engagement for my police department, because community engagement is so critical in 2024. So I can't preach about that more, and we can go into more details, but I know we have a lot of questions.
That's okay. Are there any new tools or platforms you're excited about integrating into your communication strategy?
So I am part of Wake County Joint Information System, and they just implemented Bridge for PS. And we're going to be using that tool to communicate countywide about certain things that are going on. So, and it's a great tool to be able for call for help. So we have a nuclear power plant in our jurisdiction. God forbid anything ever happened, right? We're able to communicate out to a bunch of our PIOs to reference and have help. So,
and now a word from our sponsors. Increase your social media reach and streamline your workflow with Social News Desk, the social media management software trusted by government agencies across the country. Publish effortlessly and securely across multiple social networks, including Nextdoor. Stay connected with social listening, engagement, and reporting tools all in one place. And here's an exclusive offer just for PIO podcast listeners. Get 3 months free when you sign up. Head over to socialnewsdesk.com/PIO to get started today. And now, back to our episode. Going into our next question here, let's talk about, can you talk about any partnerships? I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. How do you collaborate with other departments within the city to ensure consistent messaging?
That's a great question. I know our Department of Communications has been working really hard on this, and I know that we have created a branding guideline so that we're all trying to use the same colors and we're trying to use the same words. We're trying to approach the entire community with a collective standard. And that is where we're starting. When it comes to police and fire, I've implemented a few different standards myself, in a sense where, for example, in our police department, we had over 10 people who had access to Facebook. And so you have 10 different voices and different graphics, design ways going out, and that can be confusing to the receiver, right? So the community is receiving a brand as a personality, and if the personality that's showing through on a Facebook page is like all over the place, they're like, what's going on? I feel uncomfortable about this. So we're working on creating standards and who has access and who can post and what can post. And that was creating a brand guideline in Canva. So we got a Canva. I got everyone trained. We put them on the brand so everyone has the consistent colors. And we did the same thing with fire. So I'd say that is where we're starting right now.
And that, you know what, having the guide is something that is so important to have. It eliminates all the little nonsense that comes over email. You know, just in an email signature, if you have a specific way to do it, you stop getting rid of all the nonsense that people like to put in their messaging, and it just waters down that your whole messaging system and the way it looks. And so I think that's incredible that you're doing that, and that and Canva is such a great tool. So many people have overlooked Canva. There's so much you can do in Canva now, and the cost is so minute when you think about the big picture of it. And it's well worth it. And it's so much simpler to use than I think using like Photoshop or anything like that, because there's so much technical you can do in Photoshop. And yes, that's great. But the reality of it is most of us don't have the time or the energy to go through all that.
Yes. Yeah, and to your point, the biggest kickback that I've gotten, because when I started with Greensboro Fire, so they have over 600 firefighters. I said, "Where's your Canva account?" They're like, "Well, what's Canva?" And I'm like, "What?" So, but to the point of what we're getting at is sworn officers and sworn firefighters in the past, right? Non-sworn positions are a somewhat new trend in the industry. And they were just kind of kicked out of their role, and they're like, go learn social media, go become a communicator. And some have successfully done it. But imagine as a non-sworn professional, right? If say, and I joke with my officers about this all the time, I'm like, what if that we were doing a raid and you guys gave me a belt and a gun and told me to go in there? I'm like, I would do so bad, guys. I'm like, I am not that person. So in the same sense where we're talking about, hey, Canva is such a good tool, it's something that needs to be trained on. Education needs to be there, right? So to be able to use it correctly and for organizations to thrive with it, you have to have those key players in the field who are trained, know what to do, and able to train others. The same operations that you're doing with your officers and your firefighters, you have to think that way about your non-sworn professionals as well.
Training your communicators is highly important, and training down those people that are going to handle the minutia, the posts of social media that you may not be dealing with. Very important to do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you talk about any partnerships with any local organizations or municipalities that have been particularly beneficial?
That's a great question. Not a problem. So as a PIO, so the partnerships that have been beneficial to me as a PIO has been the Wake County GIS connection, where I get together with all the PIOs in Wake County at least quarterly throughout the year, if I don't make it to every meeting, to catch up on what's going on. And in that meeting is the Wake County School System PIO system. So as we all know, having the connections with our school systems are critical in 2024. And so that connection alone makes it a great partnership for me. When it comes to fire and police, I would say it's slightly different. For fire, my partnership with the state external affairs team has off paid dividends for me, because as soon as we know that there's going to be some sort of large weather event happening, they are already reaching out and communicating. Though I'm on the team, so I kind of get the internal scoop on things, I have been able to use that information to work with our emergency management coordinator to make sure that we're focusing on the right things. So way before Helene even came through North Carolina, we knew the western side of North Carolina was going to be impacted incredibly bad. Last Wednesday, I was already having conversations with my director saying, listen, I'm really going to focus on helping the state right now, because the impacts from this hurricane aren't going to directly impact Apex, but we know it's going to be incredibly bad for the West. And so we were already monitoring and providing that support, but they were also giving me information to know what Apex is going to expect. So that partnership is critical for me when it comes to weather events. With police, any local organizations that will come out and support, because community engagement, like I said, is so critical for PD right now. And just showing that our officers are approachable, they're kind, they're humans, they love eating Cheerios the way everyone eats Cheerios, right? It's just knowing that they're humans and knowing that they have fears too. They have families too. They're just here because they have a calling to try and help people in our community and protect their families. And so being able to show that as many ways and as many times as possible, that is critical for PD.
I completely agree with you with that. So let's talk about this. What do you find the most rewarding about your role as a PIO?
Easily, hands down, the idea that I could potentially help someone someday. A lot of what I do is based around trying to get communications to certain demographics. One of the most rewarding awards that I ever has gotten. We'll have to check that. I'll forget about it. But was when I was with Greensboro Fire, and it was based off of a booklet I created. It was the 2023 Innovation Award for the city of Greensboro, which is the third largest city in North Carolina, by the way. And it was based off of a booklet I created on Canva, where I just took information from pamphlets from FEMA in disaster recovery, and I just made it digestible. That's it. I didn't do anything crazy. I just took my marketing and communications background. I took what FEMA has already supplied, and then I tied it to making it applicable to the jurisdiction it's at. And I did this for Apex too. And then printed it, and we have it on hand. So if someone experiences a fire, our firefighter is long, right? It's like 4 pages, it's colorful, it's bullet points, and it's incredible, and it's incredibly rewarding to me knowing that if I just went through something traumatic, that someone would hand me something like this, and it would just help me through the process, figure out what to do next. I find that so rewarding that I can help people in some of their most critical times of need, and or warn them before it's coming, as long as I'm good at my job. And that's where the strategy comes in. That's where it's not just a job. It's not just, a paycheck. It's not just a number. It's a something. Prevention cannot be measured in any way, but just the concept of it has me going every single day, and I just won't stop because I can't measure it, but you know what? I know it's there and I know it's happening. So.
You are just a pistol of energy and fire. I love it.
Thank you.
What advice would you have for someone who aspires to become a PIO?
Oh, I would say be patient with yourself and have grace. And I have to remind myself that every single day, especially coming into a division that is non-sworn, right? And so depending on the environment that you're going to be placed in, whether that's directly with a police department, whether that's directly with a fire department, or you're placed in a communications department like I am right now, there's going to be a lot of people telling you what to prioritize all the time. And you just have to arm yourself with information, take a lot of classes, meet as many people as you can, make those partnerships, and then trust yourself. Trust that you're the professional and be able to come up with ways to measure what you're doing and how you're doing and why you're making the choices you are. So then that way there is no confrontation about it. I know that's a lot of advice, but
No, that's excellent. Actually, no, that's awesome. All right. What are your goals for the future in terms of public information and community relations in Apex?
Ooh, well, I would say that, and this may be a very big answer, bold answer, but my goals for Apex are the same as my goals for the country. And so I'm involved in a lot of statewide things and countrywide, and America wide. That's the best way. But part of my dissertation in my PhD that we're talking about, and it's already been talked about, something that may be published in the future, it focuses on communication patterns developed by first responders that create that void in communications from fire and police to the community. And so in Apex, I want there to become a structure of growth, if that makes sense. So a lot of departments that I'm seeing all over the country is, let's make a position, let's throw someone in it. Okay, the sworn person doesn't like it, they're not enjoying the role, they don't know what to do. I've seen other departments do it, let's throw someone non-sworn in there who has a background in it. The person gets thrown into the position, whether that's PIO, community engagement, fire and life safety. They're all kind of viewed in a very similar sense, except PIO, crisis communications, is tied to versus the others. There's no structure set out in the fire industry and the police industry for growth of an internal communications team to support the department. So if we can create boundaries and guidelines on different roles, for example, right? So branding, everyone says, oh, branding falls under this. It's a topic. Branding is the umbrella that should go over the entire department, but who focuses on that? Is it the community engagement professional? Is it the PIO? Is it your communications team? And these are all questions that everyone is throwing around all over the country. And so.
Oh, outstanding. I love it. Let me ask you this, and this is not a question on the questions I sent you. Artificial intelligence, you briefly mentioned it, but you didn't really talk about it. I ask this of everybody now because I've written several articles on artificial intelligence in public information, and I'm curious to see what everybody else is doing with it. What's your thoughts on it?
I think it's great. I think it's a tool that's needed, especially in a position that a lot is being asked of, and there's no downtime really for a PIO at any point. Or fire and life safety, like I said, those communication professional roles that everyone kind of gets confused in. I teach public communication classes at our local community college. And actually just this past weekend, we were talking about, well, how do we write a community risk assessment, right? And so I introduced them to Grammarly. And I said, Grammarly is $120 a year, and it has an AI feature to it. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, check this out. I opened up the AI writing tool, and I typed in Apex Police Department oversees a jurisdiction of 60,000 people, and based off of data analysis, these are the top 3 crimes, and this is how we plan to approach these crimes. I clicked submit, and then it was like a 2-page, well-written community risk assessment. I said, how long would this have taken you to write? Right? And they all looked at me like jaws down, and I'm like, you have tools around you that are here to help you. It's the same thing with Canva. If you want to create a graphic for your event that you have coming up, type it in, give it a first shot. It'll save you hours and hours of time. I'm not saying fully depend on it, but it is a phenomenal tool for first drafting.
And I interviewed a public relations owner of a firm out of New York. His name was Greg Mantuski, and he introduced AI into his firm several years ago in the very early iterations of ChatGPT. And he created a tool for writing a press release, and it's a freebie out there that you can use from his firm. But the other thing that he talks about is AI is not something that we need to be afraid of or that we need to say is going to eliminate our job. But what it will do is it'll help you make leaps. So when you write an article or you need to create an article on an op-ed about something that's going on in your community and you want to let the community know, you can use AI to help you create the groundwork so that you can go ahead and write that article and get it out in a lot quicker format than you want. You can also do AI with utilizing it to do shortcuts and create algorithms that will help generate reports for you and look at, like Zen City will do sentiment analysis and things like that. But you can write for sentiment analysis on a lot of different platforms and understand what's happening in your community a lot better.
Yes.
And you don't have to go searching for it,
Yes. And on top of that, the Craig 1300 tool is a phenomenal tool, but a lot of smaller departments don't have the ability to pay for a tool like that. So other AI softwares, exactly to your point, can take that mass data and poof, pop out your risks. It's exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So
there's not just one way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the important thing. We have to realize that AI is a tool. And as a public information officer, we have to use as many tools as we can to make our job easier, because like you said, there's no downtime. So when your chief or your mayor comes to you and says, hey, I need this, and you were working on something else, if it can help shorten your workload, it's worth every penny.
100%. And you never know who you're going to save by using it. If you can tell me I can save 10 people by getting a press release out 30 minutes or an hour quicker than before, of course I'm going to use AI. I'm like, all rules off the table, right? If I can help people, I'm going to use whatever tool I can get my hands on.
Exactly. And and if you do an image, there's nothing wrong with put on this image generated by AI. There's nothing wrong with being, giving it attribution so that the community knows you didn't, you're not just using it willy-nilly. You're being transparent about it, which is important. So how do you see the role of PIOs evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
I would say the role of a PIO is going to be seen as something critical. I was assisting with the 11th rendition of the CIPSE accreditation model coming out, and they're implementing in the 11th version a section dedicated to making sure you have a well-educated and a dedicated person to the role of a PIO in your organization. And so you're going to start seeing where in CALEA, it's the same way, but CALEA has an expectation of the PIO being involved in social media in some way. So there's little nuggets, right, in all these accreditation aspects that link to making sure your PIO is involved. I think that's going to develop way out to where it becomes a dedicated role with specific boundaries and expectations, similar to like a safety officer, if that makes sense. And so I see the position being way more leaned on by sworn departments, police and fire, EMS. And I see specifically with the PIOs moving in the future, what I'm hoping to see, I should say, is way more emphasis in their partnerships with their community engagement professionals and their fire and life safety educators and their CPOs. So right now, there's housing going on. Like you might have a fire and life safety educator under the fire marshal, but the PIO is under the fire chief, for example. Those two need to be working together 24/7. If there's a really bad structure fire that happens, for example, if the PIO is unaware of basic fire and life safety education surrounding deployment of information on smoke alarm safety, you're not doing your community justice. In the same sense where if the fire and life safety educator is trying to push out a poster or some sort of event coverage, they need to be going to the PIO to have them communicate with the media. Right now, it's just all over the place. There's no structure to it. So the definition of the roles under public safety communications needs to happen in the next 8 to 10 years. There's no way it'll thrive unless there's some sort of organization that comes to it. And I see accreditation organizations depending way more heavily on and having a higher expectation of a PIO.
Have you seen the Center for Public Safety Excellence? They're doing accreditation right now.
Yeah, I helped with serving on one of those boards to help with that.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if you were aware of that, because I think that is really important, that having that accreditation, whether you go to take a training class and you go for 40 hours, does not necessarily mean that you've done the work over the number of years that you have that training. And just because you were a member of the news media coming into a public information role does not mean you have the number of hours of background to be that expert. You know, a lot of chiefs and fire departments have used news media to come in and fill that role. And then there's a learning curve, and that learning curve can be excessive, especially when you're talking about crisis communications and NIMS and ICS and all that other fun stuff that is in there, and understanding a JEC. So really important to do. And I appreciate you talking about that. Rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay, I'll try.
Texting or talking?
Texting.
Movie or book?
Book.
Coffee, tea, or energy drink?
Coffee all day.
Adult drink of choice?
I don't drink a lot of adult drinks. I'm sorry.
That's okay. What would be your superpower if you could have one?
Telepathy, hands down.
Ask permission or beg for forgiveness?
Beg for forgiveness.
What place do you want to travel to the most?
Israel.
What's your favorite way to relax after a long day?
Book and coffee.
Who would you choose if you could sit down and have coffee with any historical figure, alive or dead, today?
Abraham Lincoln.
Second person that has said that in the last couple of weeks. That's interesting. Final.
Really? Okay, so, all right, I'm ready.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish that off.
I was going to, my husband and I, we traveled to national parks all over the country, and Abraham Lincoln's birthplace, if you haven't seen it, it is so cool. Kentucky, go. It has moved me to want to learn more and talk to Abraham Lincoln if I ever could, you know?
Interesting. Okay. Final thoughts. What key points would you like our listeners to take from today's interview?
All right. Key points that I would say: PIO is a phenomenal role to have. It is something that you're called to do in the same way that firefighters are called to fight fires and police officers are called to help communities and withhold the law. I would say to be a PIO, you have to have a calling for the role, to find utter happiness is not the word I'm looking for in the role, but you need to feel as though it's what you're meant to do. The other points I would love for people to take away from this is it's an ever-evolving role, right? And so the way PIOs handled things 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, it's not the same. So if you have a closed mindset on what a PIO should be doing or what tools they should be using, or if they should only be reaching out to media versus using social media, I highly recommend you think outside that box and trust that your PIOs, the newer generation coming into the market, will have something to offer you in your organization. The end goal is to reach people with life-saving information And we need to be able to do whatever we can to reach them in the most strategic way. And so trust in your PIOs, and I guess that's it. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Robert.
Oh, we're not done. Couple other questions. As a wrap up, is there a piece of wisdom or a motto that you live by?
For me personally, I would say just, I'm not, I know this is a hard one. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I would say that for me personally, I live each day like it's my last, because I know Jesus died for me, right? And so I am not scared of anything, in a sense. Like, death doesn't scare me. So when they say, hey, Victorian, we need a PIO to go out west, and we're going to have to helicopter drop you into an area, and you'll have to sleep on a cot for 7 days, right? And help with communications around body recovery, which is incredibly sad. I'm like, let's go. Like, let's do it, right? Because who better than someone to just get up and go, right? We're all going to make mistakes, but it doesn't ever hurt to try, ever.
That is a great piece of wisdom, and I appreciate that. And be safe out there when you go.
Thank you.
Victorian, how can people best reach you if they want to connect or follow up or learn about anything that you're doing in Apex?
Yeah, LinkedIn, hands down. The best way to get in contact with me is going to be my LinkedIn.
And that's how I connected to you. So that's awesome. Victorian, thank you for being on the show.
Yep. Anytime. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time. I love the PIO podcast. I'm so happy to be here.
I appreciate you being on. You have a great day and be safe.
You too. Bye, Robert.
Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you liked today's guests and their content. If you're listening on a platform that allows reviews, please leave us a review. We read all reviews, and your feedback is important to us. Do not forget to check out our sponsor. Thank you to the Social News Desk for their sponsorship and offer to all of our guests. If you would be so kind, click the link at the bottom of today's episode notes. Your support in any amount is greatly appreciated. Until then, take care, stay curious, and keep the conversation going. You are the heart and soul of the PIO podcast.